All right, welcome to Culture Couch Live this week. Mark, Carly, how are we?
Hi, Roosy. How are you?
I'm well. Mark, how are you going?
I'm going very well, Roosy. Going very well. I've had a couple of fantastic weeks, very much about connection, to be honest. So I'm looking forward to this today.
And we have
Mate,
been
you jumped
connecting
in.
with you, Roosy, while you've been here in Australia, which is why we've been on hiatus.
Hang on, you've jumped in early, you guys. Who's running the show here? Like you can't tell everyone what we're going to say before the host. Hang on, the host. We're a bit disconnected right now. We need to get more connected, which is a nice segue into what we're going to talk about. Is connection in the workplace. So well done, Marco, for just alluding to that. But Carly, it's a good point. It's funny. Yeah, obviously living in Hawaii and, which is sort of intentional and the things we've been doing. But, we've sort of said this along. We don't have a strong view and we're not there to tell people whether to come back into work or not come back into work. Our philosophy is always have the conversation. But you can't really duplicate it, can you? And it might only be a day here, a day there. But even me getting back to Australia, we had that really good session out at the Carlton in Business where we do some work out there. So even that just is a really good for us to just reconnect. So if it happens for us, you've got to think it's got to happen to everyone else. And then what are the tools in this sort of new world, Marco, that we sort of go, well, how do we reconnect, I guess, on the back of COVID, which we probably shouldn't even talk about now because it seems like a lifetime ago. But we still have a bit of disconnection, don't we?
Mm.
You want me to jump in? I'll jump in. Is that a question to me, Rosie? Righto. So yeah, my first thing is how do we define connection? Because one of my biggest learnings is connection's easy for some people. And if we start to talk about insights profiles or personality profiles in general, extroverts, great. They're usually more naturally able to create connection. But it's what does connection mean? Because connection means things to different people. Now, connection isn't just oversharing. Connection isn't telling your life story. Connection is, for me, about understanding others, but also understanding how to get the best out of each other. And a lot of that comes through intention. And we say, particularly in sessions or in the general workplace, you have to build connection through intention. So it's the whole like versus respect. You don't have to want to go and have, beers. You don't have to go and have a walk or whatever it is with people, but you have to take the time and effort and intentionally build connection in a workplace. So to answer your question, really is how to do that. Well, it's take the time. You've got to take the time. And I ask this question at the start of every one of my workshops, who's busy? And every single person sticks their hand up. And that's to be expected. But are we busy filling our days with stuff, or are we busy filling our days with intentional activities, which when you think about it is habits? So are our habits that we have, our good habits in particular, are they building connection in a workplace? And things like telling stories, understanding other people's perspectives, taking our profiles into account, giving people the benefit of the doubt is a huge one. We're pretty quick in society, but even in a workplace, to jump to conclusions and start making assumptions about people's behavior. But that's only because we haven't taken the time to understand their perspectives. We haven't taken the time to build relationships.
And I think on that, Carly, the connection piece is probably coming up way more now. And I reckon you made a really good point, Mark. What is connection? But we probably know what it's not because we hear so often, our meetings are Zoom back to back to back, and we never really talk about anything else than business. And I guess that's a really good flag, isn't it, Carly? If you're finding that you're jumping from meeting to meeting and all you're doing is talking about strategy, then you can't be connecting. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I think so. And because the taking the time part means you're getting to know them beyond work conversation. And when you're busy, and everyone is busy, Mark, like you say, absolutely, you're rushing so much that in your head, you're not saying, hi, Mark, how are you? And actually listening to the answer, you're going, hi, Mark, how are you? Right, these are the 5 things we're going to do today. This is what we're going to get done. Let's move on. And so you get through the conversation and you go, right, good, great, see you next meeting. And we haven't actually understood the other person or learnt anything about them or built trust. And I think the trust element is really important because when we talk about, getting really good business results and positive outcomes, you do that when you're more connected to a person and you have high trust with them. And you can only do that if you take the time to say, if I ask you to tick off this list of 20 things, to you, Roosy, is that going to float your boat? Or do I need to spend 20 minutes explaining the context first and then go into the list, or help you bucket it up, or whatever your preferences are? Like, my expectations aren't going to be the same for me as they are going to be for you or for Mark. And so if we don't connect, we don't know that about each other, and we can't do the work. So yeah, it's a really interesting concept, because it's really the backbone of everything we should be doing.
I was just going to say that I think the connection, Mark, sets everything up, because it sets up the understanding of your teammates and what they're good at, what they're not good at. It sets up the ability to have really honest conversations. It sets up conversations around strategy. Whatever the conversation is, I don't think you can get to the nuts and bolts of your business properly without connection. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely it does. And I want to give everyone a really, really tangible example. So I could say to you, Roosy, hey, how was your weekend? It's pretty surface level. It doesn't really mean a lot. And I'm relying on you as an individual to come back with something. And maybe you have it, maybe you don't. Maybe you're busy. I don't know. Whereas I can say to you, hey, how are you going, Roosy? How's Dylan's recent move to Australia gone? One, I've used your son's name. I know something about you, and I've recalled it because it's important to you. That conversation and the answer that I'm going to get back means a lot more to you. And I guarantee it'll get a far greater connection down the line. We're so quick in a workplace to just run the whole Monday to Wednesday. What'd you get up to on the weekend? Wednesday to Friday, we say, hey, what are you up to this weekend? It means absolutely nothing. I'm going to tell you that. It means nothing to anyone, unless you get someone who's really talkative and really open. And then it's like, you're probably not even listening to what's coming back anyway, because it's a bit rhetorical. So be intentional, learn things about people, write them down, put them in your phone, do whatever you need to do, but make sure that when you recall those things, you do it with intention. The same goes with Carl's. Hey, how's Josh's career going? It means a whole lot more than what are the family up to?
Yeah.
And if you look at it, Carly, in practical terms, and again, getting back to this hybrid workplace, we had a really good discussion yesterday with a client that they're all coming back into work because of that connection and collaboration. He said, our culture is really good. I can't remember what he said, Carly. It was 95%, and they don't have a hard and fast rule of coming back to work. He said, but we're finding that 90 to 95% of the time people are in the office. Now, one thing about connection, Mark, you made a really good point. It's hard to do on a Zoom call. If we've got 5 people on a Zoom call, I'm a bit uncomfortable saying, Carly, how are the kids? How's Ben? Geez, the doggies had a good win on the week. Because I sense that everyone's waiting for the meeting to start. Whereas if I'm in the workplace, I jump out of the lift, I walk past 6 people on the way to my office, and I have those conversations privately that are really meaningful, intentional conversations. So, Carly, there's a really practical example of a real difference when we're navigating this work from home, as opposed to we're just not having those little and often conversations, are we?
Yeah, and I think for different generations, they're happening in different ways. Like, a lot of businesses use Teams, and the Teams chat goes off night and day. And there's a lot of communication that happens on that. And so some of that, is taking its place. But I think it's really about belonging. So I think you can create connection virtually if you need to, because there are a lot of companies that we work with who do it and do it really well. But the intention is still overall the key to it. And this article we're looking at here from Gartner that we had in our most recent newsletter talks about alignment and then connectedness being, the left brain, right brain. So alignment is, I know the purpose of my business, I know what I'm here, I know what I'm meant to be doing. And that role clarity we talk about so often is really important. But then the connectedness is not just knowing what it is, but it's about belonging, identifying, and actually caring about it. And so we can tell people what the culture is, but to make them feel connected, they have to identify it and feel that they're cared for and care about other people too. So it's not, we say this all the time, Marco, you don't just put your values up on the wall and hope for the best. You have to actually create the systems and live the systems and demonstrate the systems to build the culture so people feel like they belong. And that's the connection piece too. So yes, on a personal level, absolutely. But then on a company level, coming back to that purpose and belonging, I think is really important too.
I think you made a good point, Carly, because we do have a number of clients that are doing it really well. And the thing that hits home for me, Mark, is they're intentional about getting together on offsite. So they bring everyone together. And whenever we do that in a workshop, you can see the interactions. And at the end of each day, it's like, oh, I've hardly seen this person. This was great to catch up. So I think what we're saying is, regardless of what you're doing, there has to be a mechanism to get people together. And I thought that was really good, interesting, because that particular company I'm talking about had people all over Australia, and they're pretty remote and they do different things. But their intention is we have to get together face to face at some point. And that's the intention you're talking about.
Yeah,
and
yeah, go on.
you can continue, Carlos, and I'll jump in after, because I think it's a really good one for us to sort of extrapolate a bit further.
Yeah, and I think on a business level, the things that you'd hear about that is, oh, it costs so much to bring people together, and it's a really big expense for the business, and we wouldn't have used to have to pay for an in-person event like that. But I think the value of connection is so under, I don't know what the right word is, but the value is just so huge that you don't really understand how much it actually adds to your business at the end of the day, Mark. So I just think that we can't think about it just in terms of like bottom line numbers. We have to actually think about it in terms of purpose, belonging, connection, and actual work output, high performance when we think about it that way.
Yeah, and yes, it's not quantifiable necessarily, but there's so many parts of business that aren't. And if you think about bottom line, and building connection, builds psychological safety, brings a notion of speaking up, all of that leads to high performance. You can't claim that you're performing at your best if you're not offering what your skills are, you're not playing to your strengths, you're not helping your teammates and supplementing their weaknesses, because that's why we exist as a team. And there is nobody out there that could honestly, hand on heart, say they are as good as their whole team. And that's why we exist in teams. And Roosy, you know this better than anything. You built the Bloods culture based on a team-based atmosphere. That works because there's 18 players doing what they're meant to be doing, and that comes through connection. But the other piece I wanted to probably say there is, and you're bang on about the sense of belonging, but it's not only the leader's responsibility. Often we're too quick to sort of look to the true north and say, well, what is our leader doing about building connection? There's absolutely, every single person in this business, or any business for that matter, has a role to play in building connection.
And I think on that, Mark, I think don't dismiss the opportunities. It's because sometimes it's funny, even when I caught up with you a couple of times when we went out to watch Parramatta play, come and pick me up, drove out in the car. Like that's an informal connection piece that doesn't happen if we're not intentional about, oh, well, I'm not going to rent a car, mate. Can you come pick me up? Yeah, well, I'm in Bondi. Yeah, you're staying in Coogee. And I think those things we probably tend to walk past too much, and we don't value those opportunities enough, because that's 45 minutes in a car and on the way back, where you picked up an hour and a half of connection just through making sure mate, can you pick? Yeah, no worries. But how many? I just worry a little bit too that because we've become a bit more disconnected because of this hybrid, we're just not seeing the opportunity that some of these things present to us.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
I think we should finish off, Roosy, by you telling the Melbourne story. When you started at Melbourne, what was your number one priority? How did you do it?
And I think the connection piece, probably the relationship piece between coaches and players, was the last piece of the puzzle that we sort of solved. We went down the culture code, as you know, and the standards were always really high. But then this old notion of, I had one coach that every time we lost, and he used to drive me crazy. And maybe that's why I was so strong on connection. And he'd come in and go, I'm not here to make friends. And I'm like, that's sort of irrelevant. Like, you don't choose whether I want to be your friend. Your behavior will dictate whether we're friends or not. And I just couldn't, it's not a statement you need to make. I'm not here to make friends. Well, are you or aren't you? Like, it's irrelevant to what we're doing. And it really stuck with me. So when I coached Sydney, I'd already had relationships with the players because I played with them. But during that period, I realized the value, because people were saying, oh, is it going to be hard because you played with the players? I'm like, well, I don't think so. As long as I'm honest with them, I can really eyeball them now because I actually know who they are. And I was right, because when I went to Melbourne, the first 3 to 4 months, I said to the assistant coaches, who had all come from Sydney bar one, who'd been there, guys, we've got to build relationships. We're to build strong relationships over the next 3 or 4 months, because we're going to have honest conversations, and they need to know that we're in this collectively. This is not this hierarchical thing of, oh, Roosy's come here and he's going to be angry with us if we lose and he'll be happy. No, I've come here with you collectively. And I think, Marco, to your point, I reckon that's where the connection is sometimes missed. And Emil says this really well. It's not parties, perks, and ping pongs. It's connection, because we want to be a high performing team. And you've made a really good. And every time I go back to Sydney in particular now, because I go back to Sydney more often than I go to Melbourne, as in the football club, I walk in, it's like I've never left. Like it's incredible when you walk in that club and Johnny Longmire's there, and Benny Matthews is there, and Brett Kirk's there, and Eamon Buchanan's there, and Jared McVeigh's there, and Nick Davis is there. And there's just still this sense. So it's actually a legacy piece too, I believe.
Yeah.
And we spoke about that yesterday, Carly, didn't we? To that gentleman we spoke to yesterday. As what's the legacy you're leaving? And it's hard to leave that without connection, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great story. It's a really good one, I think, to show why it's so important and so valuable.
Yeah, no, it's a good conversation. And I think that probably to leave the last point is, just don't walk past it. Just don't dismiss it, because we're not here to say you have to be in at work 5 days a week, 3 days a week, 1 day a week, or whatever. But what we are saying, you have to connect. You have to find a way to connect. And I think that's really the moral of the story, isn't it? Any last comments, Marco, Carly?
Just be intentional. Be intentional. Tell stories, because stories allow you to connect. And don't ever think that your story isn't wanting to be heard by somebody. Just be brave and be courageous and tell your stories.
Yep. And just remember the trust piece, because if you don't take time to build trust, it won't happen. Yep.
Well done. Good connection. Well, good stories. Well, good storytelling. Well done. All right. No, that was great. Hopefully everyone enjoyed that bit about connection. So again, I think I like, Marco, what you say. Be intentional. I think that's a word. And be present, intentional and present when you're building relationship and building connections. And honestly, it's going to help your business so much. So thanks, Marc. Thanks, Carly. And we'll see you all next week. Hold Your Couch live.